The morning I returned to Seattle, the rain was doing that thing again, fine needles slicing sideways as if the sky wasn't angry, just quietly punishing. I sat in the back of the Uber watching familiar streets blur behind the droplets on the window hands clenched around the leather strap of my duffel. I hadn't been back in almost 4 years. Not since Mom's funeral. Not since Julian stood up beside Dad, arms crossed, announcing we're all grieving Ethan. Some of us just don't do it out loud. Now here I was, back again. For Christmas. For Dad. Or so I told myself. But deep down, I knew I came back to see if anything had really changed, or if I was still the ghost in this family mansion. The Reyes family home sat like a fortress above Lake Washington, with its terraced stone steps, minimalist steel facade, and that obscene wraparound view of the Cascades. A place built for legacy, not love. Julian had renovated it last year, of course. Smart lighting, invisible speakers, that Scandinavian open concept shit he's obsessed with. I stepped out of the car boots, sinking into the gravel driveway, and the door opened before I knocked. It was Andrea, Julian's wife. Or no, ex-wife now. They were consciously uncoupled but still living under one roof for Teddy's sake, whatever that meant. "Ethan," she said with that half smile like we'd last seen each other at brunch, not at a legal mediation where she accused Julian of financial coercion. "You look dry." Miraculously, I replied, dropping the sarcasm just enough to be polite. She led me through the entryway where the scent of pine and bergamot clung in curated elegance. Teddy's shoes were scattered on the floor like landmines. I sidestepped a Nerf dart and followed Andrea to the living room. There he was, Julian, leaning over the kitchen island like a magazine ad for divorce lawyers' tailored navy sweater espresso in one hand, phone in the other. "Little brother," he said, not looking up. "You made it." "Wasn't sure I would," I replied. Flights were full of people pretending they still believe in family. He chuckled, finally, meeting my eyes. Same shark blue stare, same performative warmth. Julian always wore affection like cologne detectable, but never real. "Dad's upstairs," he said, with the tone of someone announcing the turkey was thawed. "Had a rough night. The tremors were worse." I nodded, throat tight. The last I heard, Elias Reyes, our father, had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. That was the official reason for this reunion, a final family Christmas before the legacy passes on. That word again, legacy. In this house, it didn't mean memories or shared recipes. It meant property patents, stock options. And from the way Julian hovered over everything like a CEO at war with entropy, it was clear he still expected to inherit it all, including Dad's approval. I went upstairs and found Dad sitting in his leather recliner, watching an old Mariners game on mute. His hands shook gently in his lap. "Hey, old man," I said softly. He looked up, eyes slow to register. Then Ethan. A pause, still making furniture. I smiled faintly. "Architecture, Dad. Spaces people live in. You know, shelter." A beat passed. "That's good. Shelter's important." He didn't say he was glad I came. He didn't ask how I'd been. But he patted the chair beside him, and that was enough for now. That evening, the rest of the family arrived like clockwork. Uncle Benny, who still smoked cigars on the deck, no matter the weather. Aunt Renee already halfway through a bottle of Napa Cabernet. Then Teddy came bounding in, 10 years old, with the face of an angel and the energy of a caffeine ad. He shot me with a foam dart and shouted, "Direct hit." Julian laughed. "Sorry, he's into tactical training now." Says he's prepping for civilian defense. Teddy's outbursts weren't new. But something about him this year felt different. There was tension under the surface, his hands twitching even when still his eyes scanning people's faces like they were puzzles he needed to solve or destroy. Andrea whispered to me later. We had a therapist lined up. Julian canceled it. Said Teddy just needed structure. Structure in this family usually meant control. I spent the next 2 days mostly avoiding everyone. Working. I had a design submission due on the 27th finalist round for the city's civic shelter project. If I won, it'd be my first major commission since the divorce. I set up in Dad's old study, now turned guest office. Brought my own hard drive, my own gear. Didn't trust the cloud with this one. Too much of me was in it. On Christmas Eve, the house was chaos. Andrea was baking gingerbread that no one had asked for. Julian was pacing the kitchen, yelling at someone on Bluetooth. Teddy had barricaded himself in the upstairs guest room with a plastic sword and 3 liters of Mountain Dew. At 4:37 p.m., I went to the kitchen to get coffee. When I returned, my laptop was open. I froze. The screen showed a string of random keystrokes, gibberish files flashing across the desktop. And there, sitting on the carpet like a gremlin with a secret, was Teddy. Sticky fingers, empty soda can, and my hard drive dangling by its cord. "You touched my computer," I asked too calmly. He grinned. It made a funny noise when I hit this button. I knelt down. "Teddy, what did you press?" He shrugged. "All of them." I didn't shout, didn't move, just reached for the hard drive and saw the light was off. Dead. I plugged it back in. Nothing. Tried the other port. Still nothing. My stomach dropped like glass. 6 months of work. Hundreds of hours. Gone. From the hallway, Julian's voice. "Everything okay in here?" I stood up, voice tight. "Your son just wiped my project." Julian looked at Teddy, then back at me. "You sure it wasn't already damaged?" "Don't," I said. "Don't gaslight me in Dad's house." Andrea appeared, drying her hands on a dish towel. "What happened?" I held up the dead drive. This happened." Teddy blinked, like he hadn't realized it was real. "I didn't mean to. I was just playing." Julian stepped forward. "He's 10, Ethan. Maybe you shouldn't leave sensitive equipment lying around." I laughed. Quiet, dangerous. Right, my fault. For trusting a child not to destroy the one thing keeping me afloat. "You need to calm down," Julian said, low and sharp now. But I was already walking away. Not yelling, not crying, just walking toward the room where I'd left my backup recording. The Nest Cam I'd brought with me just in case. The one that had captured everything, Teddy entering the room, poking the keyboard, pouring soda on the desk before I came in. I stood there staring at the footage, hand trembling above the export button. Because the truth wasn't just that Teddy had wrecked my life's work. It was that he did it on purpose. And worse, he learned it from someone. I didn't sleep that night. The footage played on loop inside my head, Teddy sticky-handed and dead-eyed, pouring soda across my keyboard with the deliberate calm of someone flicking matches into a dry forest. But what chilled me wasn't the act itself. It was the pause afterward. The way he stared at the damage like he was waiting to see if it worked. That wasn't impulsive. That was a test. I sat in the study lights off, the only glow coming from my phone as I reviewed the Nest Cam footage again, scrubbing frame by frame. The timestamp matched perfectly, 4:37 p.m. Teddy enters, looks over his shoulder, approaches my desk. He doesn't hesitate. Walks right up, yanks the hard drive types randomly, then upends the soda can. He watches it fizz, then walks out. Calm, no panic, no guilt. Like it was expected. Downstairs, the house had gone quiet. The Reyes estate was always eerily silent after midnight, like the money itself muted things. I heard the grandfather clock in the foyer chime once, 1 a.m. I was still sitting in the dark when I noticed movement outside the window. Just a flicker. A shadow. I stepped closer. No, not outside. Reflection. Someone had opened the door behind me. "Julian, you planning to sleep at some point?" he said, casually, leaning against the frame like we were brothers catching up. Eventually, I muttered, minimizing the screen. He gestured toward the empty whiskey glass beside me. "You always did get obsessive when things went wrong. Still think you can control the outcome by thinking harder." I turned slow and deliberate. "You think I'm overreacting?" He didn't blink. "I think you're using a 10-year-old's accident as an excuse to play martyr." Accident. I pulled out my phone and tapped the video, let it play silent and damning. I watched Julian's face as Teddy's actions unfolded. He didn't flinch, didn't even raise an eyebrow, just let it run to the end and said, "Kids act out." He's under pressure. I stood up. From what, Julian? From growing up in a mansion with 2 nannies and an Instagram-famous birthday cake, Julian stepped forward, voice low. "You think this is about you?" It's not. Teddy's having trouble because Andrea's moving him to Leon next spring. She's threatening to change school's routines, everything. He's not sleeping. He's acting out. I didn't condone what he did, but I'm not about to crucify my son because you left your toys unattended. I stared at him, not with anger, but with a cold, clinical detachment. That hard drive held my entire civic shelter proposal. 6 months of work. Original models, renderings, every hour of drafting. It's not a toy, Julian. It was the first shot I had at a new start. Julian didn't apologize. He just straightened his sweater. You've always been good at self-pity, Ethan. You should try being good at bounce backs. And with that, he left. I stood there for a full minute, heart thudding against my ribs. I felt hollow, like someone had taken a hole punch to my future. But there was still something in my hands. I had the footage. I had the truth. I just didn't know what I wanted to do with it. The next morning, Dad asked to see me. Andrea met me in the hall outside his bedroom. She looked tired. He's been asking questions. I didn't tell him everything. He knows something happened. I nodded, then knocked softly and stepped inside. Dad sat propped up by pillows, his hands folded over a thick, leather-bound notebook. His tremor had worsened. You could hear it in the rustle of the pages as he turned them. "Ethan," he said, voice rasping. "Sit." I did. He stared at me for a long time. Not unkindly, but not warmly either. Just assessing. "I hear there was an incident." I considered my words carefully. "Teddy damaged something important to me." Dad nodded slowly. "Julian says it was accidental." "Julian would," I said. Another pause. Then Dad opened the notebook. Inside were hand-drawn maps, architectural plans, my civic shelter concept. My heart stopped. "Julian forwarded the PDFs from your cloud account before you came," Dad said. "I asked him to. I wanted to see what you'd been working on." I blinked. My cloud was off. I saved everything locally. He smiled barely. "Not everything. Your preview submission, he found the renderings. Enough for me to review." I leaned back, breath unsteady. He'd seen it, maybe even admired it. A part of me wanted to believe this meant something, that he was proud. But then he said, "It's good, solid, conservative. You always played it safe, Ethan, even in your rebellion." And just like that, whatever flicker of connection I felt snuffed out. "I don't play safe," I said quietly. He raised a brow. "Don't you?" I stood. "Is that all?" "No," he said. "There's a lawyer coming tomorrow. We're finalizing updates to the trust. I wanted you to be present." I froze. The trust. Julian had been managing Dad's holdings for years. If Dad was changing the distribution, it meant what? A gesture of inclusion or a test. "I'll be there," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. As I turned to leave, he added, "Ethan, families break for many reasons, but they don't stay broken unless someone chooses to walk away." I looked back at him. Sometimes walking away is the only way to heal. He said nothing, and I left. That evening, I searched the cloud account Julian had forwarded from. It was real, but created 2 weeks ago. Linked to an IP address from Singapore. A dummy account. Meant to make it look like I was careless, like I left my files vulnerable. Julian hadn't just downplayed Teddy's sabotage. He'd orchestrated it. Christmas morning arrived with fake cheer and the smell of cedar candles, the kind Andrea always bought in bulk because they smell like wealth, not trees. The house was pristine white linen tablecloth, roasted duck instead of turkey, no gifts under the tree, but a carefully curated arrangement of minimalist wooden animals. The Reyes version of holiday spirit. And yet, beneath the surface, everything felt off. I sat at the breakfast table, sipping burnt coffee, my mind miles away from the strained conversation around me. Julian was recounting some deal in Singapore. Dad occasionally nodded. Andrea kept checking her phone. Teddy had vanished upstairs, likely glued to his VR headset. No one asked about the project I'd lost. No one mentioned the footage. I hadn't shared it, not yet. Instead, I spent the morning studying the dummy cloud account. It was registered under my name, sure, but the security settings were laughably thin. The IP trail led straight to Singapore, where Julian had just spent 6 weeks consulting with one of Dad's international partners. He didn't even try to cover his tracks well. Why would he? He assumed I'd either be too passive to fight back or too wounded to think clearly. He wasn't entirely wrong. I was still debating my next move when the lawyer arrived. Her name was Claudia Seal Sharp, navy suit, horn-rimmed glasses, clipboard tucked like a weapon. She didn't smile when she entered the sitting room. She didn't need to. Her presence alone shifted the temperature in the house. We all gathered there, Dad in his recliner, Julian at his side, me across from them. Andrea hovered in the corner, pretending to tidy, but really listening. Teddy was still missing. Claudia cleared her throat. Mr. Reyes has asked me to review several amendments to the Reyes Family Trust specifically related to intellectual property equity stakes and the division of future residuals. I watched Julian stiffen slightly like a poker player trying to hide a bad hand. Claudia continued. Effective January 1st, co-beneficiary status will be split evenly between Julian Reyes and Ethan Reyes, with a clause reserving 15% of liquid assets for discretionary philanthropic use overseen by either son. Upon Mr. Reyes's passing, these clauses become irrevocable. Silence. It landed like a bomb. Julian didn't speak immediately. His smile was taut like a rubber band stretched too far. That's a shift, he said, finally voice calm. When did this decision come about? Dad, to his credit, didn't blink. When I realized I had 2 sons, not 1. I looked at him then, really looked. And for a moment, I saw past the CEO, past the cold patriarch to something older and more tired. Maybe even guilty, maybe. Julian, meanwhile, was already recalibrating. Of course, he said smoothly. Ethan deserves his share. But behind his eyes, I saw it. Panic dressed up as grace. After Claudia left, I found Julian on the balcony staring out at the lake. He didn't turn when I stepped out beside him. Just said, "Congratulations. You got what you wanted." I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of things unsaid. Finally, I said, "Did you really think I wouldn't notice the dummy account?" Now he turned. Slowly. "What are you talking about?" "Don't insult me." He sighed, dragged a hand down his face. "Look, I didn't think it would escalate. I just needed a little disruption. Enough to shake your focus. Dad always responds to tragedy. I figured if your project hit a wall, he'd rally around you. Sympathy buys time. That's all it was. You used your own kid to sabotage me," I said, voice low. He didn't know what he was doing. He knew enough to pour soda on my machine, I snapped. "You think he wasn't coached?" Julian stepped forward, eyes cold now. "You were always the weaker one, Ethan. Sensitive, emotional. Dad saw it. So did Mom. You think ideas matter more than power, and that makes you naive. You don't belong in this family's legacy." I looked at him for a long moment. Maybe I don't, but I'm not leaving. I walked away before he could answer. That night, I couldn't sleep again. But this time, I wasn't paralyzed, I was awake with purpose. I started sorting the files I'd recovered from my last sink. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to submit a revised version of the civic shelter plan. I had 3 days until the final deadline. At 2:03 a.m., I got a message. From an unlisted number, just a file, no text. I hesitated, opened it. It was audio, a recording. Julian's voice, speaking with someone Dad's estate manager maybe. "And if the trust changes, we can delay implementation, right?" Julian was saying. "I'll need time to move certain holdings, shift them offshore. Elias can't track everything anymore, he's slipping." Then a pause. The other voice mumbled something. Julian again, "Don't worry. Ethan's too idealistic. He won't even know what's missing until it's gone." I stared at the screen, every hair on my arm standing up. Julian hadn't just tried to sabotage me. He was stealing from our father right under his nose. I listened to the recording again. Slower this time. Julian's voice slithered through the silence like smoke curling under a locked door. "Elias can't track everything anymore. He's slipping." The words landed with surgical cruelty, not just betrayal, but exploitation. My father wasn't just being sidelined. He was being robbed systematically, covertly by his own golden son. My hands trembled as I held the phone, not from shock anymore, but from clarity. I finally understood. The fake cloud account, Teddy's sabotage, the sudden urge to update the trust. It was all coordinated. Julian had been moving pieces for months, maybe longer. I hadn't come home to visit family. I'd walked into a boardroom war disguised as a Christmas reunion. The real question now was, what was I going to do about it? I wasn't naive enough to think confrontation would work. Julian had spent a lifetime rehearsing the script of the responsible heir, the stable son, the fixer. He knew how to twist reality like origami folding facts into whatever shape our father wanted to see. No, I needed to be smarter than that. So I started documenting everything: timestamps, server pings, offshore transfers, voice clips. I dug through old emails, contract drafts, anything that bore Julian's fingerprints. I built a timeline, a motive, a pattern. It felt like architecture again, pieces becoming structure, chaos becoming design. But I wasn't working alone. Andrea found me later that afternoon in the study. She stepped in cautiously, holding 2 mugs of tea like a peace offering. "You look like someone writing a manifesto," she said with a tired smile. I didn't laugh. Did you know? She didn't pretend not to understand. Just sat down across from me and set the mugs down. Not everything. But I've seen things, conversations cut off when I walk in, bank emails left open on his laptop. Julian thinks I'm too distracted to notice, but I've been documenting him for over a year. That made me blink. Why? Her eyes sharpened. Because he tried to cut me out of Teddy's future. Legally, financially. He thinks parenting is an extension of portfolio management. So I prepared. She reached into her coat pocket and handed me a small thumb drive. There's a spreadsheet in there, transfer shell companies' dates. I cross-checked them with trust disbursements. You'll find some interesting overlaps. I held the drive in my palm like it was burning. Why are you giving this to me? Andrea took a breath. Because you're the only one who's not afraid to hold him accountable. And because you care more about justice than optics. You always did. We sat in silence for a minute. Then I said, he used Teddy. She nodded. That's his weakness. He uses people like tools. Eventually they rust. By nightfall, I had a full file compiled. I backed it up 6 different ways, cloud encrypted USB, even printed summaries hidden in my suitcase. I wasn't just trying to expose Julian, I was preparing for war. That night, while the others watched It's a Wonderful Life in the den, I stepped outside. Snow had started falling, quiet, steady, beautiful in its indifference. I walked to the guest house where Claudia, Dad's lawyer, had been staying for the holiday week. I knocked once. She answered in slippers, surprised. I need to show you something, I said. She let me in, and for the next hour, I laid it all out: evidence, timeline, audio, Andrea's spreadsheet. Claudia read through every page, her expression darkening by the second. When I finished, she sat back slowly. This is extensive, she said. But it's not just financial fraud. If what you're alleging is true, this is a coordinated attempt to undermine a legally binding estate. It could carry civil and criminal consequences. Can you stop him? I asked. She looked at me carefully. We can freeze parts of the trust, initiate an audit. But Elias has to agree. I need him lucid, coherent, and brave. That was the variable I couldn't control. The next morning, I found Dad in the sunroom staring out at the lake. His hands were still for once resting in his lap like folded wings. He didn't turn when I entered. You were always the quiet one, he said. But not the passive one. I see that now. I sat beside him slow. I need to ask you something hard, and I need you to trust me. He turned then, looked at me fully. Is this about Julian? I nodded. He's not just pushing for the trust. He's been siphoning funds, hiding assets. He's using Teddy to hurt me, and he's using you to get everything else. Dad closed his eyes. Long. When he opened them again, there was something different there. Regret, and maybe resolve. I suspected. But I didn't want to believe it. Not after your mother died. I thought keeping him close would preserve what was left. I placed the documents in front of him. The audio, the charts. You don't have to confront him now, but you need to authorize Claudia to act, quietly, while there's still time. He stared at the pages for a long time. Then, with slow, deliberate care, he nodded. Do what needs to be done. Later that evening, Julian entered the study with the same smug confidence he'd worn since day one. Dad wants to do a family toast, he said. You coming? I turned from the window. Of course. He started to walk away, but I added and Julian. He paused. I hope you like surprises. The living room glowed in warm amber light, all curated to feel like comfort. Crackling fireplace glass decanters. the scent of cinnamon from a candle someone lit too late in the season. It was the Reyes version of cozy, meticulously arranged, emotionally sterile. The entire family had gathered for Dad's toast. Andrea stood near the tree, arms folded tight across her chest. Teddy perched on the armrest of a chair, flicking through his tablet. Uncle Benny held a whiskey glass like it might grant him invisibility. I watched Julian pour himself a generous measure of scotch, swirling it with casual arrogance. He caught me looking and offered a wink. "Still water tonight, Ethan." "Something stronger," I said and meant it. Dad sat in his chair like a monarch at twilight. He looked tired but composed. His suit pressed his cufflinks, the ones with our family crest, the stylized lion biting its own tail. Legacy devouring itself. He raised his glass. "I won't make this long," he began, voice steady despite the slight tremor in his fingers. "This family has seen triumph and fracture. We've built things that mattered, and we've broken things that should have endured. But if this year has taught me anything, it's that truth, unpleasant as it may be, is the only foundation worth building on." Julian shifted, just slightly. Dad continued. "Tomorrow morning, the final version of the trust will be notarized. That version will reflect what I've come to understand, not just about business, but about blood, about loyalty and intention." Julian raised his glass higher, plastered smile frozen in place. "To family," he said. I raised mine too. "To consequences." That made him glance at me just long enough to register the barb. After the toast, people scattered. Andrea ushered Teddy upstairs, Uncle Benny went out for a smoke, and Julian slipped into the hallway toward Dad's study. I followed at a distance. He didn't notice. Inside the study, he closed the door behind him, locked it. Rookie move. I stepped quietly to the side window that opened onto the patio, a feature Julian himself had installed back when he bragged about increasing access flow. I slipped out, through the side door, rounded the patio, and approached the window. It was cracked open slightly for air, just enough. Inside, Julian was on the phone. "I need it moved tonight," he said, voice urgent. "Yes, all of it. I don't care if it triggers an alert. I'll take the fallout. Once it hits Singapore, we're in the clear." A pause. "No, Elias doesn't suspect anything. Ethan's the one I need to worry about, but he's too busy licking his wounds." My fingers curled tight against the stone ledge. "Julian, again. We push the transfer at midnight. He signs the trust in the morning. By then, the holdings will be unrecoverable." I hit record on my phone and captured every word. Back inside, I went straight to Claudia. She was in the guest house prepping the paperwork for morning. When I played the audio for her, she didn't blink, just said, "That's enough. I'll get the judge on the line. Emergency injunction. You'll need to act fast, Ethan." "What do you mean, me?" "Julian's not going to wait for courts. He's going to make a move tonight. If we want to stop him, we have to corner him, legally and publicly." I thought for a moment. Then we use his favorite weapon presentation. It hit me like lightning. Julian had always been about optics, prestige, perfection. The man who held pitch decks like sermon notes. If we pulled this into the open in front of our father, he wouldn't be able to lie fast enough. He wouldn't even try, because he wasn't built for exposure. He was built for control. So we planned it. At 11:42 p.m., I invited Dad to the library. Said there was something he needed to see before tomorrow. Andrea joined us, holding Teddy's hand. Claudia arrived moments later, briefcase in tow. Julian was the last to enter. When he saw the arrangement, he paused just slightly at the door. "What's this?" he asked, feigning a smile. "An informal audit," I said. "You like transparency, right?" He chuckled. "If this is about the toast, Ethan, I'm flattered, but a whole team meeting seems a little dramatic." Claudia stepped forward. "Julian, we're in possession of audio evidence indicating intent to relocate restricted assets out of the Reyes Trust prior to its finalization." His smile faltered. Dad looked at him. "Is this true?" Julian scoffed. "Come on, Dad. You're going to take his word over mine. He's always been jealous. Always wanted to undermine me." "He has proof," Claudia said, opening her laptop. She played the clip. Julian's voice filled the room, unmistakable. Intentional. Cold. For the first time, Julian had no words. Dad stared at him, long and quiet. "You used Teddy," he said finally. Voice soft but shaking. "You made me believe Ethan was careless. You lied." Julian took a breath. It wasn't like that. Don't, Dad said. Just one word. Final. Claudia turned to me. We'll freeze the accounts tonight. But there's one clause left. The trust still names Julian as executor. Unless he's removed now. I looked at my father. That's your call. His gaze never left Julian's. Remove him. Julian turned to me, eyes dark with something deeper than anger, fear. You think this makes you the hero? No, I said. It makes me the son you didn't expect. He stormed out without another word. But as the door slammed, Teddy slipped from Andrea's side and followed. Which is when I realized Teddy had heard everything. Teddy was fast, too fast. By the time I got to the hallway, all I saw was the tail of his hoodie vanish around the staircase. I called his name, but he didn't stop. His footsteps echoed up the stairs, rapid and uneven like panic in motion. I bolted after him, skipping steps 2 at a time. I found him in the dark at the top landing, curled beside the linen closet like a wounded animal. His knees hugged his chest, face buried deep in the crook of his arm. I crouched down but didn't touch him. Teddy, I said softly, I know you heard. I know it's a lot. He looked up, face pale, pupils wide and darting. He said I was helping, he whispered. He said you were trying to take everything. A lump formed in my throat. He used you, buddy. He told you lies because he thought you wouldn't understand. But you're smarter than that. You know the truth now, right? Teddy didn't answer. Just shook his head like trying to erase the last hour from existence. I sat beside him on the cold hardwood arms around my knees. You want to know something? I was just like you once. Thought if I followed the rules, if I was loyal enough, patient enough, people would see me, would believe me. But some people only see what they want, and some, they just take. After a long silence, Teddy whispered, Is he going to jail? I exhaled. Probably not. But he's not going to run things anymore. Your grandpa made sure of that. Teddy wiped his nose on his sleeve. He said I ruined your work, that I ruined everything. You didn't ruin anything, I said. You gave me a reason to look deeper. And when I saw what really mattered, I acted. That's what grown-ups are supposed to do. That's what your dad forgot. He nodded once, slow, then leaned against me. Not for long. Just enough to let me know he was still in there, still figuring things out. Downstairs, the energy had shifted. The silence after confrontation is always eerie, like an abandoned stage, still echoing with the ghosts of a performance. Andrea found us on the stairs and took Teddy to bed. Her eyes met mine briefly, and she gave the faintest nod. It wasn't thanks. It was solidarity. Claudia spent the next morning freezing Julian's access to family accounts. The injunction held. Julian, meanwhile, packed and disappeared without a word, his Tesla peeling out of the driveway like a man escaping a crime scene. Dad called me into the study before lunch. He sat near the window, that leather-bound notebook still in his lap. His hands were calmer today. Or maybe just resigned. I failed both of you, he said. I blinked. You didn't fail me. I did, he said firmly. I handed Julian the keys to everything before I'd tested his character. I confused charisma for strength. I thought results meant righteousness. He looked up at me then, eyes glassy but sharp. But you, Ethan, you earned this, not just the legacy, the responsibility. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside the amended trust. I didn't look too closely. I didn't need to. I won't let you down, I said. He nodded. That's not what I'm afraid of. What then? That the price of being right is losing your family. His words landed like a slow bruise. Because I knew he was right. Even with Julian gone, the damage wasn't clean. This wasn't a neat victory. It never is when blood turns into battlegrounds. That afternoon, I took Teddy for a walk down by the lake. It was cold, but he insisted on bringing his foam sword. He jabbed at invisible monsters, each swing less frantic than the last. Can I ask you something? He said suddenly. Of course. Why'd you stay? Why not just leave when it all went bad? I thought for a moment. Then, because walking away is easy. Fighting for something that's broken, that's harder. But sometimes it's worth it. He nodded, absorbing that like gospel. We reached the edge of the dock. Snow had started again. Soft, silent, persistent. He asked, Do you think my dad loved me? I swallowed hard. I think he thought he did. But sometimes love gets confused with ownership, with pride. It doesn't mean it was your fault. He didn't say anything, just stared at the water. Then I don't want to be like him. You don't have to be, I said. You're already more than he ever tried to be. We stood there for a while, no rush. Later that evening, I found an email waiting in my inbox from the Civic Shelter Committee. Proposal accepted. I stared at the subject line, barely breathing. I clicked. They wanted to fund it. Full build. Press conference in 2 weeks. They called it a visionary model of structural empathy. I laughed, out loud, because for the first time in months, something was mine. Untouched, undeniable. I sent the email to Dad. Then I shut the laptop, walked to the fireplace, and finally allowed myself to feel it relief. But then Andrea entered the room. She looked pale, tight. It's Julian, she said. I froze. He's filed a petition to challenge the trust. He's hiring a legal team, a big one, and he's coming back. Julian didn't just come back. He stormed in like a thunderhead, 3 attorneys in tow suits, sharp as scalpels, all silver smiles and weaponized politeness. They set up camp in the old billiard room, converted it into a legal war room overnight. Paperwork spread like spores, NDAs, subpoenas, counterclaims. It was less a family dispute now and more a corporate siege. Claudia fought back hard. We had evidence, signatures, timestamps, and even witness statements from Dad's longtime CFO. But Julian was playing a different game now, reputation management. He knew dragging this out in court would exhaust Dad, tarnish the family name, and scare the board. It didn't matter if he won legally. If he smeared enough mud, he could win socially. At dinner one night, he sat across from me, napkin in lap, slicing lamb like it was a performance. This could have stayed private, Ethan. But you had to make it personal. I didn't look away. You made it personal the second you used Teddy like a pawn. He leaned in slightly. I'm not the villain you think I am. I just know how the world works. Legacy isn't about ideals. It's about leverage. I let him have the last word, because I already knew what he didn't. Dad had made a quiet trip to the notary's office that morning. He'd appointed a neutral third-party executor, removed both of us from decision-making roles. The trust would hold. And Julian's legal tantrum, it wouldn't reverse a thing. But we still had one battle left. The board. See the Reyes. Foundation wasn't just a family nest egg. It was a multi-million-dollar philanthropic machine connected to city housing redevelopment contracts, even federal grants. And the Civic Shelter project was about to go public. The press wanted a narrative. The city wanted a clean figurehead. And for once, I had the leverage. The night before the press conference, I met Julian by the lake. He'd texted just us. He stood with his back to me, watching the reflection of the moon break across the ice. Do you really think one feel-good shelter will erase what you did to this family? He asked. I stepped closer. No, but it'll remind people what this family could have stood for. He turned. No smirk this time, just pure contempt. You've always mistaken pity for power, and you've always mistaken fear for loyalty, I said. He stepped forward, eyes dark. I built this empire. You think they'll follow you because you got lucky with one project? No, I said. They'll follow because you finally gave them a reason not to follow you. Julian opened his mouth, but a voice behind us cut in. Then let them choose. We both turned. Dad, leaning on his cane, face weathered but fierce. Tomorrow morning, I'm stepping down from the foundation board, and I'll be announcing my successor. Julian's jaw tensed. This isn't how it's supposed to end. Dad nodded. You're right. It's how it begins again. The next day, reporters lined the city steps. Cameras, clicked microphones, angled the usual chaos. Dad spoke first, brief, sincere, proud. Then he passed the mic to me. I stood there, palms sweating, heart hammering, but my voice was steady. The Civic Shelter isn't just a building. It's a promise. That safety shouldn't depend on luck. That family shouldn't be defined by bloodlines or bank accounts. That legacy can mean healing, not control. Applause. Teddy watched from the front row, legs swinging under his seat, Andrea beside him with tears she didn't bother hiding. Julian didn't attend, but his attorneys did. Stone-faced. Later that night, I got a call. Blocked number. His voice, quiet, cold. You think this is over? I didn't answer. You've won a battle, Julian said. But I built the system, and you've just inherited its enemies. The line went dead. And outside snow began to fall again, soft and relentless. Story 2. The living room smelled of bergamot candle and fake perfection. Irina Alvarez, 27, knelt on the marble floor polishing my little brother's celebrity collab sneakers with the sleeve of my own hoodie. Not because I cared about neon leather, because Mom Carmen, 55, clicked her tongue and said, "Free rent means free labor cariño." The entire clan watched their private circus. Dad Victor, 57, still in golf clothes, swirled whiskey and chuckled. My cousin Mauro, 19, filmed for his day in the life vlog. Aunt Rosa whispered to Uncle Luis, both pretending pity they did not feel. Center stage on the velvet sectional lounged Leo Alvarez, 24. TikTok's newest men's style oracle. He scrolled ring light glowing and lifted his shoe 2 millimeters. "Scratch right there," he murmured, eyes glued to follower count. I scrubbed while the gemstone on Leo's ear reflected rainbow dots onto the floor, as if mocking me with disco confetti. "Back straight," Rena Mom snapped. "A slouching spine shows a slouching spirit." Laughter rippled. I felt heat rise, but I said nothing. 2 months earlier, the indie bookstore where I managed events had shuttered overnight. Severance, a fruit basket, and a group hug. Hometown rent shot past my savings, so I'd limped home to the suburban palace I once escaped. Here I was, the gap year failure in family lore, a placeholder until Leo's next brand deal hit. They called it helping me reset. What it felt like was being cast as unpaid extra in Leo's lifestyle channel. Organize my collabs, hand wash my vintage denim, silence the blender while I'm live streaming, leave the thermostat at 74 because my skin hates dry air. Every rule delivered with a smile that said, "Be grateful." I tried. I freelanced editing romance novellas at night, but Mom waved the contracts like confetti. "Pennies," she sighed. "Focus on getting Leo more reach. He'll pay you properly." Around me, the room blurred, but the humiliation stayed sharp. When I hit the smudge on the sole, Leo sniffed. "Missed a spot, sis." His phone was still vertical. I existed only as background content. Cameras clicked, Dad toasted. My cheeks burned, yet my hands never shook. They tightened. That night, after dishes and another lecture about work ethic, I climbed to the attic, a space nobody had entered since Grandma's funeral. Dust motes floated like quiet witnesses as I pried open boxes labeled Rhina College junk. Inside lay my old DSLR external drives and the leather journal where I'd documented family gossip for a creative nonfiction class. I charged the camera, powered the drives, and discovered more than nostalgia, dated photos, receipts, deleted posts, breadcrumbs of the myth my parents sold to sponsors. Mom's foundation for empowering underserved teens had lost nonprofit status last year. Dad's golf course investment faced an environmental lawsuit. Leo's zero-editing skin routine used Facetune's premium filter pack. They thought the attic was a graveyard. It was a vault. The next morning, the household resumed its pageant. Leo rehearsed a brand-safe sob story about humble beginnings. Mom micromanaged the lighting. Dad barked into Bluetooth about image containment. Nobody noticed the missing drives or the faint red LED of a hidden microphone I'd clipped beneath the kitchen island. Nobody heard. When, after breakfast, I spoke one sentence to my reflection in the bathroom mirror, "You are done being a prop." I mapped my revenge in bullet points on sticky notes tucked inside an unused recipe book. Collect proof. Build audience. Time the reveal to maximum brand deal week. Each goal had subtasks, deadlines, contingency branches, years of event planning turned inward. I felt the click of purpose, a clean sound like a lock turning. That evening, Leo threw a tantrum over lukewarm oat milk. Mom yelled my name. I arrived with a notebook and a benign smile. "Just noting preferences," I said. He laughed, unaware the bullet microphone in the notebook spine streamed every spoilt syllable to a cloud folder labeled Operation Marigold, Grandma's Favorite Flower, Resilient and Unpretentious. Within 48 hours, I captured Dad joking about tax write-offs that weren't legal, Mom mocking scholarship kids on her charity mailing list, and Leo practicing fake tears for a mental health partnership. I layered clips with timestamps, adding captions for accessibility and clarity, trimming silence, enhancing audio skills, textbook, and precise. Outside, cicadas droned. Inside, nobody sensed the walls listening. Yet data alone wouldn't topple an empire built on gloss. I needed witnesses. Enter Tessa Min, 31. Ex-PR strategist blacklisted after exposing a greenwashing scandal. We'd traded DMs back when my store hosted her book tour. She owed no love to influencer culture. When I pinged her, got a story of hypocrisy receipts included, she replied with a single emoji and a meeting time. I slept 3 hours in 2-night bursts powered by spite and instant coffee. And for the first time since losing my bookstore, my lungs filled with something that wasn't despair. It was focus. Razor edge bright. Day 4. Mom announced a family brunch live stream to celebrate Leo's 10 millionth follower. She assigned seating script outfit palette. I nodded, compliant. Inside puzzles clicked into their last grooves. Brunch would be streamed across 3 platforms, sponsors tagged live. Viewership would peak. Perfect. As I ironed Leo's pastel shirt, he bragged about a future shoe line. "You'll stay on as assistant, right?" He smirked. "You're good on your knees." I looked up, iron hissing. "Only until standing pays better." He laughed, oblivious. The countdown had begun. And none of them, Mom with her curated kindness, Dad with his scotch-soaked ego, Leo with his veneer of authenticity, suspected the person they dismissed as background noise was already writing the script for their downfall. The Saturday sun crawled across the Alvarez driveway like a spotlight, judging everything it touched, and I woke before it heart-pounding with a mix of stage fright and feral glee. Today was brunch day, sponsor day, exposed vein day. The house smelled of cinnamon brioche and tension. Mom had ordered a private chef because our girl needs to look competent on camera, ignoring that the chef would stay off-screen so viewers could pretend Leo had baked everything himself. I slipped into a lemon-yellow wrap dress chosen intentionally. The color made me easy to track on every feed, and the soft sleeves hid the mic transmitter taped to my arm. Downstairs, the crew of ring lights already buzzed. Mauro tested angles, Rosa arranged fruit to hide the burnt spots. Dad practiced his proud father grin in the oven's reflection. Leo strode in, last face glazed with highlighter, wearing the sneakers I had polished. Never mind that a second pair sat in his bag, ready for a spontaneous unboxing halfway through the stream. He winked at me like we were co-conspirators instead of predator and prey. I served coffee, my smile as neat as the latte art. Inside, I timed every movement to the second hand of the wall clock, 7 minutes until go live on TikTok 8, until Instagram 10, until the YouTube simulcast where chat would be hardest to moderate. The attic laptop running on a remote desktop app was already logged in under a fresh alias, Marigold Truth. Tessa waited on an encrypted call, listening to my breathing and monitoring the file dump. "Clip 1 queued," she whispered. "Say the word." I carried a tray of pastries past the dining table and brushed against Mom's phone lying face up. A single tap disabled her notifications. She would not see the firestorm until too late. 9:59. Leo counted down aloud for dramatic effect. Cameras rolled, cheerful jingle fake applause greetings in 3 languages. My family sparkled glitter overwrought while I hovered just off frame pouring orange juice. Minute 4. Leo launched into the humble origins monologue I had heard so often I could mouth it backward. He reached the pre-planned line about donating 10% of all merch profits to disadvantaged teens. I glanced at Mauro. He zoomed for emphasis. Now. I clenched my fist, twice the signal Tessa and I had rehearsed. In some corner of the internet, clip 1 slipped into the social current Leo 2 nights earlier, laughing with Dad calling charity kids brand mascots with better tax perks. The video was 15 seconds crisp, captioned, "Impossible to spin." At minute 5 of the live brunch, the chat column twitched. A wave of puzzled emojis, then red face anger icons, then sentences in all caps. "What did you call the kids?" Leo, someone typed. Leo, still in performance lag, didn't register. He was busy guiding the camera to his hand-painted brioche. Mom's gaze finally flicked to the monitor. Confusion curled her flawless lipstick. I refilled her mimosa before she could reach for the keyboard. Leo opened the merch link QR code urging viewers to scan for exclusive early bird. The chat detonated. Tessa released clip 2 mom practicing lines about empathy, then muttering off camera, "If they can't afford full price, they don't fit the brand aesthetic." View counts spiked, but donation pledges dropped to 0. Sponsors pinged frantic DMs my family couldn't yet read. Dad's phone rang. He silenced it, still clinging to script discipline. I almost felt pity as he toasted to integrity passed down through generations. Almost. The third clip. The one about Dad bragging that environmental fines were cheaper than real cleanup was scheduled for minute 11, precisely when the whipped cream tower would appear so Leo could smash it playfully and show his fun side. Instead, viewers watched the tower fall out of frame because Mauro, startled by the comments, jerked the camera. Cream hit the rug. Leo cursed, forgetting the mic. Millions heard. They also heard Dad hiss, "Watch your mouth, you're live," and Mom hiss louder. Find out what's happening and fix it. Too late. Advertisers started withdrawing. One by one, logos vanished from the overlay and automated response from their brand safety bots. The stream bled sponsors the way ships bleed oil. I stepped in, wiping cream, pretending damage control. My pulse pounded, but my voice was silk. "Let's read some viewer questions," I suggested, knowing full well what waited. Leo forced a grin as Dad scrolled the chat and went pale. The word fraud repeated like a strobe. Mom whispered, "End stream." Leo, addicted to spotlight, shook his head. He tried to salvage things by pivoting to mental health advocacy, cueing crocodile tears. Clip 4 dropped Leo rehearsing tears, complaining the glycerin stung his eyes. The audience howled. Someone in chat pasted phone numbers for investigative journalists. The brunch collapsed into muffled shouting. Mauro kept filming, instinct stronger than loyalty. Scandal meant clicks. I caught his eye, gave a subtle nod, promising I would share the traffic. Allies were forming in real time. When the feed finally cut at minute 15, the house echoed with alarms, devices pinging sponsors, leaving lawyers calling. Mom slammed doors. Dad cursed legal counsel. Leo accused everyone but himself. Amid the chaos, I collected shattered glass, looking dutiful. In my pocket, the flash drive labeled Phase 2 rested like a hot coal. Tessa messaged, "You broke, trending, congrats." "Ready for next step," I typed at sundown. She replied with the fire emoji again. Evening brought storm clouds and recriminations. Statements had to be drafted, blame assigned. Mom decided to scapegoat Mauro because he leaked something obviously. Mauro protested, voice shaking. I intervened softly. "Let me review footage, maybe I can trace the breach." They agreed, too desperate to think straight. That granted me access to every device. I backed up Mauro's originals, then assured him I'd protect his channel if he stayed quiet. He agreed, loyalty bought with simple humanity they never gave him. By midnight, the house felt smaller, the marble colder. I watched them pace, fearing ruin, yet still convinced image mattered more than apology. That blindness was my ally. I uploaded the full dossier, a 30-minute montage of their hypocrisies, annotated, cross-checked, legally vetted by Tessa's contacts. We scheduled premiere for Monday morning peak commute doomscroll hour. The file was set to auto-send to newsrooms if either of us went offline for more than 12 hours. Redundancy mattered. Cornered animals, lash out. I ended the night on the attic floor beside Grandma's cedar chest, the air thick with old lavender. I whispered thanks to her memory for the hiding place and rolled stiff shoulders. Exhaustion weighed on me, yet beneath it thrummed fierce calm. Step 1, ignite. Step 2, let oxygen do its work. Downstairs, Mom wept over spreadsheets. Dad called favors that went to voicemail. Leo drafted an apology with more emojis than verbs. They still didn't see me, the quiet daughter they taught to stay useful. They saw only a crisis born from nowhere. But tomorrow, when sponsors demand answers and fans demand refunds, They will look for a culprit. They will climb the stairs and notice the dust disturbed. That moment will be dangerous. Predators are most reckless when wounded. I lock the attic door from inside and set an alarm for dawn. Monday waits, so does justice. And I no longer a prop have miles of fuse left to burn. Monday, dawn, skittish sky, bruised purple as though the weather app sensed drama loading. My phone vibrated with Tessa's message before the birds spoke dossier scheduled. 10 minutes. I brushed sleep from my eyes, scanned the attic one last time for stray evidence, then slipped downstairs. The house sounded like a wounded animal pacing, its cage doors slammed, faucets ran, voices hissed in corners. No one had slept. Mom had traded her silk robe for a power suit 3 hours too early. Mascara smudged beneath determined eyes. Dad stood at the breakfast bar, tie skewed, reading a cease and desist draft that threatened to eat its own tail. Leo hunched over a laptop, firing off apology tweets so quickly spell-check gave up. They froze when I entered, expecting an accusation, perhaps a confession. I offered none, only poured coffee and asked if anyone needed a refill. They declined, wary. 8:02 a.m. My pulse matched the ticking wall clock. Somewhere on millions of phones, our dossier flashed open. 30 minutes of unvarnished arrogance, each clip time-stamped, each image cross-referenced. Viewers who had suspected but never proven hypocrisy now had proof delivered with subtitles and receipts. The first push alert came from trend feed influencer family exposed in damning video. Dad's face blanched. His lawyer called. Leo shrieked that the video was deep-fake slander. Mom waved her phone like a sword. Find the source, strike it down. They scattered, racing for laptops, tablets, even Mauro's drone controller, anything with a screen. I washed dishes, listening to their panic cascade. Notifications multiplied faster than they could swipe. Sponsors posted statements distancing themselves. Celebrity friends deleted followbacks. A charity partner announced an independent audit. Within 40 minutes, Hat Alvarez lies trended first worldwide. Leo threw a mug. Porcelain burst against the fridge, coffee spotting his pastel sweatshirt like blood spatter. Dad roared about shareholders. Mom tried molding the chaos into a redemption arc. We'll pledge double to environmental causes, release a tearful family video tonight. Damage is reversible if we act united. United meaning obedient. Leo spat that he'd rebuild solo, that her outdated PR instincts ruined him. Dad blamed Leo's vanity. Mom blamed Dad's greed. Voices spiked. I collected shards with gloved hands so no one saw my smile. Mauro lingered in the doorway, clutching his camera like a teddy bear. I nodded discreet reassurance. He mouthed, "Are we safe?" I mouthed back. "Stay calm." At 10, the front gate intercom buzzed, reporters in vans, neighbors with phones, a process server carrying papers from an eco-watchdog group. Security lights blinked red. Dad barred the doors, but eyes online needed no driveway access. They dissected every video Alvarez Media had ever posted. New offenses surfaced hourly. By noon, a meme of Leo crying into whipped cream became currency on every platform. Meanwhile, Tessa, operating from an undisclosed cafe, funneled the story to traditional outlets. She texted mainstream TV, picking it up at 4. Do not be alone with them. I heeded the warning. My family's anger circled like wasps searching for the sting's origin. Around 2, Mom cornered me in the pantry. Shelves of artisanal condiments boxed us in. She spoke gently, too gently. "Rhina, darling, you have digital skills. Help us trace this hacker. I'll compensate you real salary stock options. Let's protect the family legacy." She reached for my wrist. Her nails trembled, lacquer-chipped, first flaw I'd seen in her armor. I held her gaze, let silence widen until sincerity cracked. "You taught me legacy means truth," I answered, voice even. "If truth hurts, maybe legacy needed surgery." Her eyes hardened. She stepped back as though seeing a stranger. She whispered. You did this. I neither confirmed nor denied. She fled, slamming spices from shelves in her wake. By dusk, lawyers occupied the dining room drafting statements that smelled of desperation. Dad paced the hallway on speakerphone, begging investors not to pull out of the golf resort. Leo attempted a live apology, but chat demanded he answer for calling scholarship kids mascots. He rage quit after 3 minutes. That failure trended too. Through it all, I moved ghost-like, fetching water, delivering chargers, gathering fragments of their unraveling for Phase 3. I needed one final piece to bury them legally, proof of Dad's fraudulent accounting. Grandma's cedar chest held only family letters. Ledgers must be elsewhere. I gambled on the study safe. Midnight found me picking the lock with bobby pins, heartbeat hammering. Click. Inside passports, title deeds, and a USB labeled tax archive. Jackpot. I copied everything to cloud storage, relocked the safe, and wiped fingerprints. Minutes later, Dad's footsteps thundered past. He'd noticed the study light. I pretended to dust photo frames, scolded him for scaring me. He bought the act. Paranoia dulled perception. Upstairs, I emailed Tessa a zipped file codename Phoenix Feathers. She replied with a link to an investigative journalist hungry for corporate malfeasance. My hands shook not from fear, but from acceleration. The point of no return lay behind me. Ahead waited accountability. Sleep was a rumor, but I drifted to shallow dreams where Grandma whispered encouragement. Dawn Tuesday, subpoenas whispered across fax lines. Police cruisers idled down the street. Dad's lawyer advised surrendering documents voluntarily. Mom called a crisis management guru who demanded 7 figures up front. Leo tried launching a new username, but platforms flagged him for ban evasion. Each defeat tightened the family circle until they sat together in the kitchen, silent, cheeks hollow. I entered with toast and saw their eyes gone was superiority replaced by raw survival instinct. Dad spoke first, voice brittle. Rena, it seems you're the only family member untouched by scandal. Could you, he swallowed, issue a statement on our behalf? People believe you. Translation, become our shield again. I set the toast down. The world doesn't need another statement. It needs accountability. Start with a real apology. Step down from your platforms. Cooperate with audits. Return misused funds. Mom scoffed. That would destroy us. No, I said, calm as still water, it might just save what's left of you. They stared, processing a reality without scripted control. Outside sirens neared, maybe coincidence, maybe not. My phone buzzed. Journalist confirmed receipt of Phoenix Feathers' story going live Wednesday. Perfect timing for part 4. Mauro appeared filming discreetly. His lens caught Dad covering his face, Mom's shoulders crumbling, Leo's tears finally genuine. I allowed it. Truth required witness. When Mauro lowered the camera, he whispered, "What happens next?" I exhaled. They choose confession or collapse. Either way, justice lands. He nodded, more man than boy now. As night swallowed the windows, thunder rolled, heralding summer rain. The house, once gleaming with curated perfection, now felt honest in its ruin. I returned to the attic, locked the door, and drafted a public letter explaining my role, my silence, my decision to speak. I would post it after the financial expose hit, ensuring context framed the conversation. Words flowed. Guilt pricked, but did not stop me. I wrote, "Truth is not betrayal. Betrayal is the lie that family loyalty excuses harm." I saved proofread, trimmed redundancies, and scheduled release. 3 a.m., rain eased. I lay on the creaky cot, muscles aching, spirit strangely light. Somewhere downstairs, my family confronted their forks in the road. Tomorrow, the world would know their choice. And in the hush between thunderclaps, I promised myself one thing. No matter the fallout, I would keep walking toward light, not polished marble, but honest sun. Part 4 will open when subpoenas knock louder than denial, and blood ties face the cold steel of law. Wednesday, rose heavy sky, the color of wet slate, as though the storm refused to leave until truth signed for the package. At 6, my scheduled letter went live. Its title, I Am Rena. Not a prop, shot to trending within 30 minutes. I detailed years of silent complicity, the bookstore's collapse, my family's demands, and my decision to expose rot before it poisoned more people. Comments split between sympathy and shock, but even critics admitted the receipts matched the confession. The transparency undercut any spin Mom's crisis team drafted overnight. 8 sharp, the doorbell chimed. 2 agents from the Department of Consumer Protection waited with badges and neutral expressions. Dad tried charm. They preferred procedure. A subpoena for financial records, another for environmental compliance, and a third for charitable donations gone missing. Mom reached for a pen to stall. The taller agent slid a voice recorder across the counter and read her rights. Ink never touched paper. Reporters flanked the curb microphones like spears, but Mauro streamed inside the foyer, granting the world an unfiltered view. He no longer hid behind silence. His caption read, "Accountability begins at home." Leo hovered off-camera, cheeks blotched, muttering that the family should have fled to the lake house. Too late, his passport sat locked in a bureau, seized as possible evidence of flight risk. By noon, investigators flipped every drawer. They discovered 2 sets of ledgers, the polished version for auditors, and the raw one for internal eyes only. Numbers didn't merely mismatch, they contradicted. Dad's face drained as agents photographed each incriminating page. The family lawyer begged for a private room. Agents declined. Transparency cut through marble facades like rain through chalk. While they combed offices, I brewed tea for staff and officers alike. Small kindness, strategic and sincere. One agent thanked me, voice low. Bravery often looks like betrayal to those who fear daylight. The phrase warmed my spine. Outside, protesters gathered, former scholarship kids, eco-activists, laid-off bookstore patrons. They held signs, image, integrity, and return the grants. Mom peeked through blinds, hand over mouth. Her curated persona crumbled. Without scripted lines, she seemed smaller, a silhouette inside a cage. She gilded herself. She whispered to me, "How did we become villains?" I answered gently, "By pretending optics were conscience." Tears welled, but did not fall. 3 p.m. mainstream outlets aired the investigative segment built from phoenix feathers. Drone shots of dying fairway grass at Dad's resort cut to charity banquets where donation checks bounced. Montage ended on Leo rehearsing tears. The anchor's closing sentence, "Authenticity sells until it's audited," rang like a gavel. Sponsor exodus turned to legal withdrawal. Contracts dissolved on live television. Crisis guru arrived late, surveyed the chaos, and suggested voluntary press conference plus full restitution plan. Mom agreed instantly. Leo refused. Dad hesitated. At that fissure, the house seemed to tilt. Dad, voice rough, asked, "What happens if we confess?" The guru replied, "Reduced penalties. Maybe probation instead of prison. Reputational salvage over decades instead of generations." Choices condensed into 2 paths, both steep. Evening settled. Agents left with evidence boxes. Subpoenas satisfied for now. Lightning cracked as if signing the sky with jagged ink. The family convened in the living room, the same stage where humiliation began, only this time cameras streamed honesty. Mauro's lens stayed live. Viewers deserved the sequel. Mom clasped my hand, unpainted nails digging into my palm. She faced the feed eyes rimmed red and spoke without teleprompter. "We lied. We profited. We hurt those we promised to help." Her voice shook, but held. She mentioned restitution funds, independent oversight, and personal resignation from all boards. Dad followed, admitting to falsified reports, agreeing to cooperate fully. Leo hovered last. Silence stretched. Audience numbers climbed. Finally, he inhaled, removed his diamond stud, and said, "Influence means nothing without trust. I exploited both. I'm stepping offline until I'm worth listening to again, if ever." Chat slowed, empathy nudging outrage aside. True remorse smells different. Viewers sensed it. After the stream ended, exhaustion collapsed everyone into separate corners. Thunder softened into steady rain, washing pollen and pretense alike. I stood by the window, breathing petrichor, when Mom approached. She handed me a small velvet box, Grandma's marigold brooch. "She wanted you to have this at graduation," Mom whispered. I kept it, thinking I knew better. "I'm sorry for every time I silenced you." I turned the brooch in my fingers, gold petals still bright. "I never hated you," I said. "I hated the script." We embraced, awkward but real, shoulders trembling as old rolls shed like snakeskin. Dad approached next, eyes hollow, yet softer. "Investigators will call you. Tell them everything. Don't shield us." The words cost him pride, maybe freedom. I nodded, tears finally surfacing. Leo lingered near the hallway, unsure. I stepped to him, offered a plain glass of water. He accepted, voice barely audible. "Teach me how to be authentic," I answered. "Start by listening when no one is filming." He managed a fragile smile. Midnight approached. The house lay quiet except for rain ticking roof tiles. I climbed to the attic one final time, packed the camera drives and sticky note battle plans into a tote. My mission here ended. Tomorrow, I would catch a train to a coastal town where an independent bookstore sought a manager. They liked my public letter said courage stacked shelves better than any algorithm. I descended with luggage at dawn Thursday. Mom and Dad perched at the kitchen island signing disclosures. Leo brewed coffee, offered me the first cup. Mauro filmed sunrise through the patio door, color correcting nothing. Authenticity needed no filter. I set Grandma's brooch on my jacket lapel. Dad asked where I'd go. "Forward," I said. Hugs followed, stilted but earnest. I stepped into morning air tinged with damp earth and legal reckoning. As the gate closed behind me, I felt lighter, not vindictive, just free. Beneath clouds breaking into pale blue, a thought blossomed: redemption isn't a show. It's a daily chore, like shelving books or planting seeds. My family had their own rows to hoe. I had pages to organize, stories to champion. And somewhere in that coastal town, sunlight would spill over paper spines, smelling of possibility, untouched by scandal. Morning tide murmured against the pier as I stepped onto Tamarind Bay's main street, sun-streaked, briny, alive with gull laughter. 3 days earlier, I had arrived by rickety train, clutching a single suitcase and Grandma's marigold brooch. Now I carried a crate of galleys from Seaside Chapters, the indie bookstore that smelled of cedar shelves and ocean wind. The owner, Jaya Patel, 42, greeted me with a grin that crinkled sunburnt cheeks. "Ready to make literature glamorous again," she teased. I grinned back. Inside, floor-to-ceiling windows captured waves rolling like giant commas, punctuation between chapters of my life. We spent the morning cataloging new arrivals and rearranging the display table. Customers drifted in, teachers hunting poetry, surfers grabbing travel journals, retirees debating cozy mysteries. No one recognized the face from yesterday's news scroll. Anonymity felt like breathable air. Yet news travels on currents faster than tide. By noon, Jaya's phone pinged. An influencer watch account had posted my relocation, framing me as whistleblower turned opportunist. Commenters split venom and applause. I shrugged, but unease pricked. Lunch break found me on the back deck, overlooking weathered fishing boats. I called Tessa. She said lawsuits against my family solidified. Dad negotiated a plea, Mom agreed to audits. Leo volunteered at a community garden off camera. Good steps, but trolls needed villains. Brace for backlash. Tessa warned. Truth redeems slowly. Outrage sprints. We ended the call with quiet resolve. The first sign of storm came Friday evening. A white envelope slid under the bookstore door, photocopied memes accusing me of destroying hard-working entrepreneurs. No return address, only a watermark from a local co-working space. Jaya frowned. Coastal towns archive grudges like seashells, she said. We locked up with extra turns of the key. Saturday crowds flooded Tamarind Fest, a boardwalk fair of kettle corn and folk guitars. I volunteered at the bookstore's pop-up stall, recommending paperbacks about resilience. Halfway through a sale, a teenage girl in family-branded sneakers hissed "traitor," then vanished into throngs. My gut tightened, but I kept smiling. The sea kept breathing. Online, a counter-narrative bloomed claims that I'd doctored clips for clout. One thread proposed that Tessa bankrolled the expose to revive her career. Another insisted the Department of Consumer Protection was deep state theater. #scripted saboteur trended. Familiar feeling gaslight flares against truth returned like acid on old scars. But this time I had allies. Jaya installed extra cameras, locals signed a statement of support, and Morrow posted raw footage proving authenticity. Sunday, dawn broke peach and turquoise. I opened seaside chapters early, savoring solitude among book spines. The bell above the door jingled. Detective Val Chang, 38, stepped in raincoat folded over her arm. She explained that someone had filed harassment reports against me, claiming I incited doxing. False, but police must investigate. Her tone held no accusation, only weary duty. I provided statements, evidence logs, contact details. When she left, sympathy softened her eyes. Tamarind Bay protects its own, she said. Yet backlash mutated. Opportunistic media pitched paid interviews. I declined. Sponsorship offers dangled six-figure deals for exclusive behind-the-scandal content. Temptation flickered. Those funds could repay bookstore investors Dad defrauded, but trading integrity for cash replayed the family's original sin. I hit delete. Midweek, an anonymous podcast released an hour-long episode painting my family as victims of feminist sabotage. It cherry-picked footage, wove conspiracies, and urged boycotts of the bookstore. Yelp flooded with one-star reviews from users who'd never set foot in Tamarind Bay. Sales dipped. Jaya's smile wavered. I apologized, but she squeezed my shoulder. Stories matter more than scare tactics, she said, and good stories outlive bad noise. That night, lightning stitched the horizon. Power flickered. The shop darkened except for emergency LEDs. I stayed late, inventorying while wind rattled shutters. Around 10, a pebble hit the front pane, then another. I crept to the window, hooded silhouettes sprinted off, leaving spray-painted words, "liar," bleeding down glass. Heart-pounding, I called Detective Chang. She arrived with officers, documented damage, promised patrols. When she left, she paused. Hate thrives in shadow. Keep lights on. I sat alone among tilted towers of books, adrenaline buzzing. For the first time, doubt clawed had my search for justice seeded fresh harm. I opened Grandma's journal, tucked between pages of the marigold brooch. A margin note I'd forgotten glowed under flashlight. Courage plants seeds others will water after we're gone. Tears slipped uninvited. I closed the journal, inhaled paper and rain, and decided fear would not author my next chapter. The following morning, community members arrived with rags and biodegradable cleaner scrubbing graffiti while chatting about their favorite novels. A local carpenter offered shatterproof film for windows. Students painted a mural of marigolds and open books over the cleaned wall captioned, "Truth Takes Root." Press covered the solidarity. The boycott hashtag drowned in images of neighborly hands and bright petals. Trolls retreated, bored by positivity. That evening, Jaya hosted a reading circle focused on redemption narratives. We discussed sin's consequences and the slow craft of rebuilding. When my turn came, I read a passage from a memoir about surviving public shame. Voice steadied, I confessed my own fear and gratitude. Applause felt warm, not worshipful community knit by honest threads. Meanwhile, court dates crystallized. Dad faced sentencing in 6 weeks. Prosecutors recommended suspended sentence plus restitution, citing full cooperation. Mom's nonprofit license was reinstated under independent board control. She accepted a volunteer role, salary $0. Leo, offline for the first time since puberty, sent me selfies of soil-stained hands and young trees he'd planted, each tagged @earned not sponsored. Progress fragile but real. But yet one ember still glowed. A shadow investor in Dad's resort threatened countersuit claiming my exposé tanked property value. Their lawyer summoned me to deposition. I would need to return face cross-examination and prove intent was whistleblowing, not malice. Courtrooms amplify nerves. Still, retreat was not an option. Jaya insisted on covering my train fare. Books saved me once, she said. Let me foot the ticket for the woman saving books now. I hugged her humility, eclipsing pride. On the eve of departure, Tamarind Bay staged a lantern launch. Paper globes drifted over water like silent prayers. I wrote one word on mine. Grow, then watched it ascend, amber light reflected in ripples. Detective Chang stood beside me, off-duty. First roots are thin, she murmured, but dig deep when storms return. I promised I would. Back in my rented attic room, suitcase packed once more, I drafted witness notes, cross-referenced statutes, and rehearsed calm breathing. Outside, the sea exhaled steady rhythm, hypnotic assurance. Grandma's brooch rested on the nightstand petals, catching moonlight. I touched it and whispered thanks not for victory, but for resilience. As I closed my laptop, a message popped from Tessa Court's Another Stage. Remember, your script is truth. See you on the record. I smiled, powered down, and allowed sleep to claim me. Tomorrow, I would ride rails toward confrontation. But tonight, waves and wind sang lullabies of endurance, and somewhere in my chest, new roots gripped the sand a little tighter. The city courthouse rose from asphalt like an old sandstone cliff layered by years of stories fossilized into precedent. I arrived before sunrise, suit, pressed brooch glowing faint gold at my collar. Tessa met me on the steps, legal pad in hand, confidence sharp. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed a nervous dirge. Opposing counsel, a shark in charcoal wool, greeted us with a smile polished as marble. He represented the shadow investor, claiming my exposé devalued the golf resort. Translation silence costs less than cleanup. I reminded myself truth walks taller than threats. We opened with sworn oaths. The courtroom smelled of paper and nerves. My heartbeat slowed to coastal rhythm as I spoke, recordings authenticated by experts, timestamps aligned with public live streams, motive rooted in consumer protection. The shark tried to paint me bitter, a failed bookseller seeking fame. I answered each insinuation with concise fact, severance, date, freelancing invoices, the day I found the attic drives. Jurors scribbled. The judge, stoic behind silver-rimmed glasses, asked for clarity on whistleblower statutes. Tessa provided precedents like stepping stones across doubt. Cross-examination drifted toward my family's private apologies. Counsel implied reconciliation proved malice absent, therefore damages unwarranted. I met his gaze and said, healing personal wounds doesn't erase public harm. Accountability stays public. A juror nodded. The shark's pen paused. Afternoon sun angled through high windows, dust motes dancing like closing arguments. Day 2 centered on property valuations. Expert witnesses admitted investor forecasts dropped before the exposé, citing drought and lawsuits. The scandal accelerated decline but did not invent it. Counsel's narrative cracked. He pivoted, accusing me of profiting from media attention. I listed every sponsorship offer I had refused, every book event I worked for standard wage. My bank statements spoke louder than my voice. During recess, I checked messages. Dad pled guilty, received 18 months probation and mandatory community service maintaining river trails he once ignored. Mom's restitution fund exceeded projections thanks to grassroots donations and her own relinquished assets. Leo's garden livestream, now ad-free, showed seedlings breaking topsoil. Watching him laugh at earthworms, I felt history breathe. Closing arguments thundered. The investor's lawyer conjured images of livelihoods lost. Tessa countered with drone footage of chemical runoff testimony from scholarship kids who never received promised grants, and a simple slide integrity costs less than deceit. Silence followed electric. Jury deliberation stretched into evening. I paced the corridor counting steps like prayer beads. Tessa practiced calm but tapped her foot. When doors reopened, faces solemn, I inhaled sea air only memory could provide. Verdict claim dismissed. Whistleblower protections upheld. Court costs charged to plaintiff. The hallway erupted in quiet cheers, reporters, activists, even a janitor who whispered, "Good for you." I hugged Tessa, tears, warm relief, heavier than exhaustion. Outside dusk draped the skyline in indigo. Cameras flashed, microphones reached. I delivered one sentence, truth stands, no embellishment. Headlines wrote themselves. We celebrated with street cart tacos and laughter that tasted of release. The following week, I returned to Tamarind Bay, suitcase lighter, shoulders straighter. Jaya welcomed me with a laminated newspaper clipping courtsides with bookstore manager in free speech case. She framed it beside the mural. Business thrived. Tourists bought novels and postcards of marigolds. The hooded vandals never reappeared. Sunlight had chased them into smaller shadows. Months passed like turning pages. Dad finished trail work early, chose to stay on as volunteer. He sent pictures of cleaned streams, hands blistered but proud. Mom completed ethics training, now mentors young nonprofit leaders about pitfalls of optics over impact. Leo's garden fed a food bank gala. He spoke without sponsor logos, voice steadier. Mauro sold a documentary about the saga to an educational channel, profits split with affected charities. One crisp autumn dawn, I stood on the beach, gulls carving the sky. I planted a marigold cutting above the tide-lined soil, crumbling between healed fingers. Waves rushed, retreated like crowds we cannot control. Behind me, Seaside Chapter's lights clicked on storytime hour awaited. I whispered to the sprout, "Grow honest, grow wild." Then I walked toward the shop lungs full of salt and hope, ready to open doors, stack books, and nurture every story that dared to break free from silence.